Welcome everybody. Apologies and reasons for absence.
Councillor Venning has a business meeting, so he definitely won't be here. And Councillor Green has as well, but he hopes to be in later.
Okay, that's fine. Declaration by members of any interest pecuniary or other than pecuniary in accordance with the Code of Conduct as on the agenda. Does anybody have anything? I didn't think there would be.
No.
Nope. Okay, we don't have any applications then. And a reminder to everybody that the meeting is being recorded. So I'll adjourn the meeting in a moment for the public session. We have got two planning applications to consider, and we'll take them first. One is the Spinners and one is Stafford Farm. So is anyone here to talk about in the public seats? Is anyone here to talk in favour of the Spinners? No? Does anyone else want to talk about the Spinners in Poplar Road? No? Everyone's, so we'll talk about that, us councillors will talk about that when we get to it on the agenda. Stafford Farm at Moons Green. Would you like to talk in, yes. Tell us about it?
Yes. Yes.
Please do.
Oh, now?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
You're on.
Well, basically, after the outline planning commission back in November, we have obviously changed the plan a bit. We've lowered the roof. We've worked with a more traditional architect, a local architect this time, and we think that this building fits in with around Moons Green, and we've lowered the roof as well, so it's less, intrusive. That's about it for that, really. What else do I want to say? About the fourth bedroom, yes. We've added a fourth bedroom because, as some of you know, we've got 3 children, 2 which are coming into teenage years. So we don't think that would be unreasonable to ask for the fourth bedroom now, rather than to, in the future, ask for the fourth bedroom.
Just to remind us, it was a 3-bedroom outline.
Yes.
Yeah. And what's that done to the outline size of the building?
I don't think in plan size it's much different, because the other bedrooms are now smaller, so the actual space isn't much different.
It may be a little bit bigger, but it's not a lot bigger.
Not much, no.
Okay. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for Billy Joe?
No.
No? Okay. Anyone else want to talk about that particular one? No? Yes? No. Okay. So that's the 2 planning applications. We'll go on to talk about other things that people want to raise. I'm assuming that some people here may want to talk about the outline proposal for the hedge at Coronation Field. So if we talk about, if that is the case, I mean, if no one does, that's fine. But if they do, then we'll talk about the hedge first, and then we'll go on to other things. So, and can I ask, please, that while I'm very happy that you sort of add your name to points that have already been made, they don't need to be made time after time after time, because all that's doing is taking everyone's time up, and we have limited time for the public session. So feel free to raise things, but if one point just keeps getting raised over and over and over again at great length, then it's obviously a waste of time. Off we go, please, whoever. Phil.
I've spoken today to my former mentor at Harrow College, who was very senior actually there when I was working there in conservation this year, and discussed it with him. And we sort of generally in accord. I wonder whether we've had actually any of the people who want this opened up to take the councillor along there and say, look, I'd like to see this sight line so we can get an exact idea of what they want, and whether it's doable, of course. From my knowledge of the hedgerow, and Alf will know a lot more about it than I do, but it is mostly a privet hedge with a lot of hawthorn, another few indigenous species, so it's quite good for wildlife. They're very valuable for bats as well. Bats can go along hedgerows and stop it if they find a gap and turn around. But I think that's more a problem on the larger, long rows of hedgerows than all the hedgerows we have around here. I personally feel that there is, without knowing exactly what the people are wanting, who want to do this, there could be a good compromise if this is thought to be a valid reason, and that is that there could be gaps in strategic places in the hedgerow. In the bit between the bus stop and the garage, there's a picket fence there as well, as I know. So that's got to be taken into consideration. But my view is that the hedgerow is probably too tall. It could take a lot of cutting back. I've got a leaflet here from Ashford Borough Council in praise of country style hedges, so anybody who wants to have a look at it can have a look at it. And I know from personal experience that you can reduce the size of a hedge considerably and still have a viable hedge. If it was reduced to 4 feet, or preferably a bit more, and cut in country style A shape with a flat top, it should survive very, very well. And if anyone looks at the hedgerow where it's been attacked by a very good gardener in Poplar Road, opposite number 8, which is Dave Izzard, who's worked very hard on that hedge. It absolutely blitzed it, but you can see what happens if you do that to a hedge and it comes back. That's a bit unusual situation, but he's now planted flowers there. You can see where the edge of the pavement is. So what I'm saying is that you could do a considerable manicure job on the hedges, still make them look very attractive, lower them quite a bit, and maybe some gaps as a compromise for the people who really want this.
Okay, thank you. Who wants?
I don't know, I haven't actually mentioned it.
Is there same for I'm pretty certain that the sort of hedge around the green is no, did you hear that? No, is it? Wouldn't have thought it's more than 4 foot. Is it that hedge?
Yes.
Is
Yeah,
it the one around the green?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, who wants to talk?
Next to it, you can certainly see over it. I'm not 6 foot.
Who wants to talk next?
If it's cut to a height where you can see over it, that would be a big advantage.
Who wants to go next? Gillian. Yeah.
Actually, this is an article that has actually been brought to my attention by Sue Wigan, who, as you know, knows a considerable amount about local flora, etc. Regarding the Telegraph, and they're saying that the research team in from Surrey University says that hedges should be installed on the edge of pavements as they are closer to the level of most exhaust pipes and can absorb damaging particles before they disperse into the air. And that a study in Guildford found that planted hedges along a busy main road cut toxic fumes by around a third. So as far as I'm concerned, for the people who are actually using Coronation Field, as I do, it would be a great detriment to have the hedge removed, since it is actually absorbing a lot of the toxic fumes from the road that runs right beside it.
I got a copy of the article from Gillian. Did you all get it as well? Yeah, okay. We've had the article then. Okay. Carry on.
Well, that's my point. I think that
Okay.
even just on that point, I think that it is essential to keep it.
All right. Next one. Mary, yeah.
Have we actually had the written confirmation from Ashford saying that this is doable as far as they're concerned? There is no impediment.
Sure.
That's correct.
Can you possibly forward it to me? Be very grateful. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else on it? No? Okay. Does anyone want to raise a different topic? Miriam.
I see you have village gateways on the agenda. The OMB unit are promoting the branding of the OMB, and they've designed various signs for villages which actually include on them that were in the Highfield OMB. And I think that if the parish council are looking at branding the village, and I know that's what you're talking about, I think that's a really important thing to put on those signs, because a lot of people are not aware, as we know, that we are in the Highfield OMB. I think we've had the recent decision through from Smarden, who've now having 50 more houses in their village, and if they'd have been in the OMB, they'd have been spared that. I mean, Smarden put up a fantastic campaign to try and defeat Gladman, who are now sort of focusing on the borough in Charing, in Craven, 125 in Craven, 245 I think in Charing. And I think we're going to be lucky that we're going to escape their attention because we are in the OMB. So I think if we could ground that on the gateway signs, I think that would be good to consider.
Thank you.
Oh yes, Pat.
As we're talking about hedges, can we put the polite notice in for trimming back hedges? Some of them are getting really bad up there, or by the old butchers and various other places. They're eye height.
Sure.
You know,
I think it is a nuisance. Brambles obviously can be cut. The problem at the moment, as I understand it, is we're not supposed to be cutting hedges. You can trim them, can you?
And for safety reasons, you can do it.
You can do it. Okay.
That particular one is one that I normally correspond with John Mallet about that. So that's.
I've already done that.
Have you? Oh, thank you. I was going to say, following this meeting, I was going to.
Yes,
Can I
Chris.
just go back to the question of the hedge removal for the moment? Will you be taking into account the written comments that people, that I have sent, I know, when you make your decision?
We've certainly got them. They're unsolicited at this point, but we've certainly had them, and they've been circulated around. We're only going step by step, and I can't determine the way the council will go. That will be for the council to decide as it takes each step. But I think that it is quite likely, if the council still wants to proceed when it's got to the point of having assembled its pros and cons, it might very well want to have a parish meeting, and at that point obviously there's an opportunity for people to put their points in. But if they've come in writing, I don't think we're going to ignore them. They do actually.
Sorry, Chris, my fault. I think I've acknowledged everyone else's.
They do actually, as you might expect, they do actually, as it were, as a group, they repeat themselves. In other words, they, a bit like voting, they all fall into a pile of this point, this point, this point, this point, and you know it'll not be very difficult to see where there are views coming in. There is a lot of repetition.
I think the difficult thing is as well, at the moment we haven't got any firm proposal on which way we might go with it. So I think until we've got some choices on proposals, then we can go to consultation and ask people what they think about different proposals.
This is why it's going step by step, because if the council comes to a point of pros and cons, obviously not to take a decision. If they decide they want a public meeting, then that's got to be before the decision. But the other side of that is not only, well, we want to do it, or we might do it, or we might not do it, or whatever, so we'll have a discussion. There are different possibilities about what might be done, and they can only be filtered out, as George has just said, by looking at the pros and cons. You weren't here, Chris, at the last meeting, and I think I said the same at the one before. In both cases, I said, look, there are 4 bits of hedge, and this is not counting even Phil's point about gaps. There are 4 bits of hedge. There's the bit across the front of Coronation Field. There's the bit across the Stocks Road side of the green. There's the bit along the street side of the green, and there's the bit around the back of the War Memorial. And so immediately you get to the fact that you could do none, you could do 4, or you could do 1, 2, or 3 of those 4. In other words, there's umpteen combinations, and they come with some things the same pros, some things the same cons, some things vary. So to take a simple example, just to make my point, there is one particular issue about the sight lines at the road junction. Well, the Coronation Field hedge is probably, subject to Phil's point of needing to look at the sight lines very carefully, the Coronation Field hedge is not so likely to be an issue there as the one along the front of the green. You know, that's obvious. So that's going to take a bit of filtering, and this is not going to happen soon. I don't think that's, well, it could even happen tonight if the council say, that's it, we're not interested anymore. You know, I'm not ruling anything in, I'm not ruling anything out. But if it has in fact got the legs to proceed a bit further, or a lot further, it's going to take time. If we wanted to, let's just say also we couldn't take the hedge out at the moment anyway, because of the concerns about wildlife. There will have to be a seasonal issue. So, you know, don't sit there panicking that the bulldozer's actually coming in tomorrow, because there's no way it can.
One other point, the sight lines on the corner, I feel, it's a purely personal view, that those sight lines could be improved considerably if the hedge went round the back of the war memorial. There is a view that the memorial faces onto the road. I think we find it doesn't. I think we find it's four-sided. So you're just as relevant if you're standing around the back of it, and you could get a lot more people off the road. If the hedgerow went back and there was perhaps a bit of hard standing there, and it was also kept very, very low. Obviously, bearing in mind the other danger, that children could hop over too low a hedge and run out into the road. Just a suggestion.
I think that the thing about the War Memorial, and I haven't gone and studied it closely, I agree the War Memorial is four-sided. I think the issue is that whether the War Memorial started totally omnidirectional when it was put in, the way the rest of the hard standing and the steps and that have been built around it since actually gives it a direction of facing onto the road by implication. But you're right, I don't think that, you know, one side of it is the same as another and the thing on top is the same in every direction. True. Okay, anything? Oh yes, Mary.
Is it fair to suggest that because, however much of this we're ripping out, it's a major decision, that it would be unwise to proceed without the overwhelming support of the parish, because otherwise if we're going to divide the village again, in which case it's better to agree to maintain the status quo rather than to launch into a change of this proportion.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you that assurance, because ultimately we're talking about the council's ability to take a decision on its own land. So ultimately, I think that the council wants to have, it's up to them ultimately. I think the council wants the opportunity to hear from members of the public and their views on it, but ultimately the council has the obligation, the responsibility to take that decision. So I can't say, oh well, the council won't do it unless they've got this or that or the other. That would be inappropriate. That would be wrong, in fact. You can't take the decision from the council. But that's some way off, as I said. Miriam.
Well, I mean, you have appointed a new Minister for the Environment. I won't compare him to Michael Gove. I think he will probably do a very good job for us. I mean, surely that's something that ought to come under that remit, maybe with a working group, because as you're quite rightly saying, one proposal has been put forward, which is pretty radical, and you seem to be suggesting that there could be other alternatives, and we've indeed had one put here tonight. Obviously the initial proposal is being put forward with quite a lot of thought and being well prepared, and I'm sure Phil would put forward his own proposals so we could all look at them. If that was all done under the umbrella of our new Environment Minister, as I call him.
I don't quite understand where we get from the sublime to the ridiculous.
Voices,
we've got a minister and we've got a PC.
Yeah, but you've appointed parish councillors to take responsibility for certain aspects of the voices community.
Oh, I see, yeah, okay.
Right, okay, so it strikes me from what you're saying that there needs to be an awful lot more research into this. And wouldn't it be better to do that under that umbrella, and getting people, obviously, people like Phil who've got ideas, and Karen clearly got ideas, and others that might have ideas, to then come forward with some ideas, which could then be put forward, instead of sort of, you know, we now haven't got a clue what you're going to be saying in this session coming up at all,
and we'll be stuck here as usual.
Well, nor do
not
I,
be-
because I've
not
got
be
four.
able to.
I don't
what I'm
either. I've
saying
got
is,
four
from
colleagues.
a member of the public's point of view,
Mhm.
it would engage more people who are interested if you did it that way. If you know, Alan's prepared to do that, I don't know, but it strikes me that that would be a good way of finding out what the ideas are, maybe sending out a survey. Instead of having initially a parish meeting, then once they've got all that, that could then come back to the parish meeting, and the village would be able to look at the proposals and then perhaps, you know, consider them.
Right.
I mean, it just strikes me it could be a better and
Okay.
more inclusive way of
Right.
doing it.
We've heard your suggestion, thank
Not
you.
inclusive from my point of view, Miriam, because I was asked for quite a long time to sit on the Voices Committee, as you know.
Yeah.
And although I was very hard pressed for time, I came in rather late in the day.
I think we're from the start.
Afterwards, I was dropped without any explanation whatsoever. So,
Really?
what can I say?
I'm not even aware of that, then. I mean, I can imagine why you were being dropped for somebody from an environment perspective. You would be one of the top people up there.
We're drifting into other people's affairs now, anyway. But I heard your point.
But I mean, well, I mean, that doesn't mean to say you couldn't be included again. I mean, I would think it would.
I heard your point, and everyone else did as well. So, Chris, did you?
Sorry, no.
Oh no, right, okay.
Can I just say that I think I probably replied to everybody but Chris to say that I've forward anything that comes to me, I forward to councillors. Okay, so even though I haven't, I think I've acknowledged everyone else. Sorry.
Okay. Any more subjects? No? Okay, thank you very much. I'll close the public session and we'll move on to the council agenda again. So the first thing is to confirm the minutes of the last meeting. Does anyone have any points on queries on the first page? 711, 712, 713, 714.
Yes, I have. There's not 113 days in June.
No, there aren't. I found that one, yeah.
So it's correct in the main one.
And the other thing I noticed, rather bizarre, was that we went from B to D. Was there a paragraph missing or just the lettering?
Just the lettering, because it's planning.
Right.
Fine, yeah.
Should be all right then.
What does it normally? Because it should follow on the normal way.
Sure. I spotted it today by chance when I was having another look. I didn't see it the first time.
It's always like
Yeah, he's planning to highways. So, but look, it's B
yeah,
to D
there's
again. It's because
A-B.
did finance disappear? Yeah, finance is A this time. So what was
it was caretaker that was missing. We didn't do a caretaker one that time.
Changed.
Yep, sorry.
Okay, so in fact, there is
changed
nothing
the
missing,
order.
it's just the letters. Okay, is everybody happy with them if we recognise that there aren't 113 days in June and the lettering needs slight changing? Okay, can someone propose that they're all right? Yes, Colin and George, thank you. Thank you very much, and everybody else is happy? Yep. So I'm signing, initialing here. Am I? Is this the one?
Just initial that one. That's nothing there.
That's me, so that will be right. Yeah.
And that one initialed. And if you could just initial along the alteration.
Just here.
Well, if you sort of do it down there, then everyone would say. And initial, please. And then sign up there, please.
Have you done the 113 days?
I said I'd corrected
Oh,
it.
yeah. Right, good. Six, seven.
Yep.
Okay, that's the minutes done. On the matters arising, then the first one is SIDS, speed indicator devices or indication devices. we've had the response to the questions that we raised last time about things like why do poles cost £750, and as we correctly guessed, that's because it includes digging a hole and sticking it in it and getting traffic lights and God knows what, and other things like that. Does anyone else have anything they want to raise at this point? Given that Yvonne is trying to get the funding at the minute or something.
Yes, I mean, it's a funding issue, really.
Yeah, that's been asked.
Yes, it's been asked for. It's been, but I haven't had anything
The
yet.
information you sent out was really helpful.
It was very helpful.
About how to download information from it and the batteries and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
We
basically,
have no timescales on the
No.
potential funding.
so basically, we're rolling on that one. Okay. The next matter arising is the insurance renewal.
If you remember, we went with Hiscox, but I hadn't got a 3-year figure. The single year was 866, and the 3-year was £823.49. So that's what we've gone with.
Per year.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So we'll have that. We'll have the saving. Thank you.
Good.
All agreed with that. Good. The village gateway, the sort of gates at the village, which Miriam has already commented on, whether they have a AONB logo added. This is something that has been sort of floated, isn't it?
Yes, it was Councillor Green brought it up, if you remember, and kept chasing me about it. I went to KCC, and it's basically the same procedure as with the SIDS. We need to tell them where we would like to put them, and they then look to see whether it's okay, and then come and meet us and tell us where it should be.
Well, we should have told them in the first place. Yeah.
But the cost will be down to us.
Okay. Except for the contribution from the AONB, obviously. Their best wishes, I expect.
Okay, so we're putting that in train. Really.
You were trying to get him to come and actually have the discussion.
Well, yeah, that's what I wanted to say, because it's just such a waste of
Did he
time.
refuse that?
Oh yes, because that's not what they do.
No,
They want to know first, and then they look it up on the map,
Yes.
and then they say, we'll come and discuss it with you.
We've got no idea of the cost.
Well, no, I haven't looked into that until yes and no.
Right.
This is another situation, drift could occur, isn't it?
That's right.
A drift could occur depending on the county council.
I mean, do you want me to? Well, I need to know where you want it put. This is the first thing.
Well, I thought that the principle was that they went at the 30 limit, because it then carries the 30 sign,
Yes.
and the gate sort of makes it more visible.
That was my understanding.
But of course, the trouble is that the 30 sign line is defined in an order, and they can't move it. And if it's an inappropriate place to put it, because it won't obviously be halfway across someone's drive because the pole couldn't go there. But if it's inappropriately placed for a gate, then it becomes an issue. But the ideal would be where the 30 sign is.
So while that's happening, could we not still find out the price? So we've got, so we're not then waiting for that after that process happens. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. They're not listed here. Do you want to bring up the Ellen Terry issue here as a matter arising?
If you remember last time, Councillor Green also mentioned the it was the parking problem down at the Ellen Terry Museum, where you've got the vehicles and people and no pathway, and they reverse out, and he was considered a danger. So it was suggested that I spoke to the Tenterden Town Council, because the Ellen Terry Museum is within their jurisdiction. I did contact Phil, the clerk there, and as he pointed out, the actual parking is in our parish because we're on this side of the. But he contacted National Trust, and as you're coming towards Wittersham, the bit on the right-hand side, which is the uneven bit, belongs to the National Trust. The parking bays are Ashford Borough Council land. And obviously the bit behind where you could have a pathway is going to be highways. So I have got a telephone number for National Trust if we want to talk to them about it. But that's the way it is. originally he said that they won't take much notice if there hasn't been any serious accidents, but the National Trust came back to say that recently there was a truck hit somebody and they had the air ambulance out. So that was is an issue. So Chairman suggested that perhaps I get on to Ashford and explain that has been an accident, what can they do to improve the situation.
The council acknowledge that they are responsible for safety and maintenance of the lay-bys. Do they actually accept that? Because my experience quite often is that while it's listed as them being the owners or the authority, then when it comes down to doing something, they're rather reluctant. And that may be your experience too.
I'll find out, won't I?
In a way, if we're trying to get the path around the back of the vehicles, it may just be because cars have got longer, but the cars stick well out into the road, as we know, which tends to imply that there isn't any room the other side, or they're not very keen on going in there. But on the other side, of course, parking is harder to engineer than footpath. It may be they can just kind of chuck down something fairly light and footpath this way.
You can only fit into those bays if you've got an estate car, if you put the front wheel on the grass, because they're diagonal. That's the problem. So you won't. Otherwise, they do stick out.
So that takes up where you put a path.
And also the other factor is that a lot of the people visiting there are strangers to the area, so they're not aware of the danger of vehicles coming down the hill. Some are foreign drivers as well, so probably look the wrong way even.
It is 40 limit now, which it didn't used to be, of course.
And it says beware pedestrians in the road. It might be a matter of improving signage. Might be.
In an ideal world, there'll be an old sort of Acme footbridge across the channel there from the lay-by to obviate the need for people to walk up the road, because that's when they're going to get squished.
But you need to lift both sides for the disabled people.
Are we going back to ABC then?
Well, I haven't it only came through recently, so yes.
It is dangerous. There was 2 Continental lorries came around the other day, but to stop the other traffic. Large ones.
Okay, so you're going to get on to Ashford.
Yes.
Yep.
The other thing is for me to thank Yvonne because she has produced the documents that I asked her to do a while ago, and you've all got yours now. So that is a step forward.
I will just at this point say that I'm sure you've all looked at them. At the front you've got a contents page, and it says when it was agreed, when it was reviewed, although each one has got the dates on it as well. We've got a gap. We're talking about safeguarding policy later on in the meeting, so I put it down, but you haven't got that yet. And the village contact list hasn't been completed, so you haven't got that. But I have left a page, one of these. So ready to put it in when we get it.
Yep. And everyone else has got their standing orders. It's only me because I
Yes,
have my book earlier.
yes.
I'll find the right page to put it in.
Yes, I think so. When we do get a new or updated, reviewed, whatever, you will get that plus a new front page for you to put it in. So you've got it.
That'll be automatic.
Yes. So you'll get it automatically.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm hoping that although it's all sort of, a bit arduous, at least we will all have to hand the things that we might need to refer to without scrabbling around and trying to find something from the year before last and whether we've got the same version and all the rest of it.
Yes.
It seems to be good practice, and as I said at the time when I first suggested it, it was a presentation by the Mayor of New Romney that said that they'd done it for all their councillors, and it seemed to be a good idea. So I'll give her credit for that. Okay, planning applications then. The first one is the Spinneys, Poplar Road, the increase in ridge height, 2 front-facing dormer windows, rear envelopes, roof lights, roof terrace to rear elevation, change of use of garage to living, and the creation of a new access. Who wants to start us off? Thanks, Sue. Anybody else?
I thought it was an improvement to the look of the buildings. Yeah.
I certainly thought it was an improvement to the building.
And road safety for the extra access.
Yeah, certainly.
I mean, it may be Kent won't like it, but in principle, it sounds much safer being near the bend.
Well, there's been a couple of occasions recently when I've had to drop things off with Paul,
Oh yeah.
You know, and it's blocked situations there, and I think it'd be very easy.
Sure. Okay, so we're all happy with that one.
Yes.
We can support that, thank you. And the second one is Stafford Farm. We've already heard from Billy Joe. It's what they call here, and I'm a bit surprised at the wording, but the Reserve Matters application for dwelling approved under outline consent. I thought it was a full planning permission, but if they call it a Reserve Matters application, I don't mind. We've seen it. It's got the outline done by whoever it was. As Billy Joe said, it's got 4 bedrooms now. They certainly are not particularly large. The smaller ones, there's one decent one, and children's ones are sort of box room sizes. L-shaped. Fits on the site all right. And it should tidy the thing up, which is one of the reasons that we were told in the first place.
I think it will tidy things up, because yes.
Indeed.
I would agree.
Okay, I mean obviously the key thing is for Ashford, who may still be sore about it, and they'll have to take that one way or the other. But from our point of view, we're all happy to support it.
Yes.
Good, thank you. That's great. So now we get to the considering further to further consider next steps in the review of the value of a possible project to remove part or all of the hedge at Coronation Field in Low Green. Who wants to start off on that? Everyone's sitting on their hands here. I can give you a little tiny update, apart from all the emails that you've been seeing.
I think because I've been away for the last fortnight, I've just been benefiting from all the emails that Yvonne's been flowing around, pros and cons,
right.
Which has been useful in the sense of trying to get my head around.
Yes, we've got the note that David put out.
Yes.
And we've got the slightly more kind of, instead of just bullet points, the slightly more texted one of mine that I put to him earlier. And there are 1 or 2 that are coming in from the emails that are coming in from the public. They usually fall into the ones we'd already figured out, but there are 1 or 2 additional ones. Pollution, as it happens, is one, which we'll talk about in a moment. I had a word with the AONB unit today, and they've sent me some stuff. I think we need to talk to them a bit more, but on the face of it, from the conversation and from what they sent to me, there is no impediment to it being done on grounds of AONB, but obviously we want to respect the AONB and make sure that we're following their views. The simple fact is really there. Area of outstanding natural beauty. Hedges are part of that typically, but on the other hand, being able to see the natural beauty is part of it as well. And obviously, opening it up means you can see it. Leaving the hedge means you see the hedge. You've got that choice. So that was the AONB unit. I have had a talk to the KCC area, the social services part that deals with safeguarding, because that's a loose end. We've talked to the police, and we've got to, I think, talk to them at a higher level, but so far the view we've had is they'd rather things always be open rather than hidden. It did remind me actually of, I've heard the same thing twice. You heard it, George, you came to the Windmill AGM, didn't you? The ex-High Sheriff of Kent, but he also said the same thing at the Calc AGM when he addressed it there. He started off, of course, as High Sheriff, he's got formal responsibility for policing, notional responsibility for policing on behalf of the Queen. And he pointed out that it's a difficult job policing the rural area because there was some vast mileage of hedges in his reckoning, and he said every hedge is a place for a criminal to hide behind. The general point he was making was that openness actually helps. As I say, the police that we've talked to said, yeah, always have it open, but we need to talk to them at a more serious level. The other thing is the safeguarding part of KCC. I talked to them today, spoke to someone in that side who said no, it wasn't really for him. I needed to talk to the policy area, and he put me through to them to leave a message to ring me back, which I have done, and I will await to see what they say. the question of how much there is a linkage between safeguarding and openness remains to be seen. We'll find out what they say.
I mean, I was responsible for safeguarding for HCC for many years, but I think that's a red herring really in terms of this issue, because children shouldn't be over there unaccompanied anyway, smaller children, and older children should be able to look after themselves. So I don't think that's an issue, and I think it's, with all these people, it's the question you ask. So if you ask the police, what would be better to have no hedge or have a hedge because balls might go in the road, they'll say, well, it's better to have a hedge. If you say to them what would be better, to have a hedge or no hedge, because someone might be hiding around it, they're bound to say don't have a hedge. So it depends on the question that you're asking. The answer
when I said about the hiding, I mean that's what the High Sheriff was talking about. My thought earlier was simply that if anything is to go on that shouldn't, whether it be antisocial behaviour or crime or bullying or abuse or something like that, then obviously being able to see it can stop it. But
then, well, we're going to go down every street and ask people to take their hedges down as well.
Plainly not.
More abuse happens in the home than happens out on
all true. You're quite right. Anyway, they are two loose ends at the moment. The point about pollution, I thought I did print off and looked at the thing which Gillian sent around, and she did comment on it a little bit. I did read the article when it first came out, although I got it in the Times instead of the Telegraph. This research is very clearly about heavy traffic in city streets, and it makes that very clear. Congested city streets, most congested city centre roads, narrow streets with high buildings, pollution in towns, busy main road, full potential in cities like London. Wittersham is not in any of those grounds. I'm not saying there is no pollution, but it isn't a pollution situation that they're dealing with. It also says, quite interestingly, although the way it printed out left the end of the line off, emissions from vehicles start to dilute very quickly as you move, and I think it's move away from the source. In other words, just like sound, it spreads out. We're not that compressed against it. I mean, if you stood right on the edge of Coronation Field, behind the hedge, and the hedge wasn't there and the lorry went right past you 2 foot away, then I suppose you'd have to say that could have an effect. If you are in Coronation Field in general, because it's quite big, the answer would be, I think, no. But anyway, thank you for sending it on.
I think my sort of concern in general, before we sort of proceed further down the road, is that we have got all the information we need from the different organisations about the viability of doing looking. And I mean, it says about part or total removal. Well, it could be no part or no or total.
Oh, yes.
So we've got the no bit to add on to that, really.
Indeed.
And I thought in the minutes it said that you'd spoken to someone at Ashford Borough Council, but you were waiting for someone else.
Phil Cook, and he has come back and said yes.
Okay. But I think they may. I mean, I've got, for example, DEFRA have got a hedgerows regulation 1997, and they've got a frequently asked questions bit in that, and from that it gives you the impression that the hedge has been there sort of more than, I think, 30 years or 40 years.
It's actually quite misleading, that. Unfortunately, that's something that Miriam talked about at the beginning. The hedgerow regulations 1997 themselves are very clear. The DEFRA guidance, I'm sorry to say, isn't, because it mixes it up with other things. Subject to paragraph 3, which I'll come to, these regulations apply to any hedgerow growing in or adjacent to any common land. No. The only common we've got is over in Jubilee Field. Protected land, and that's defined elsewhere as meaning SSSIs and nature reserves, or land used for agriculture, forestry, or the breeding or keeping of horses, ponies, or donkeys. And it isn't any of them. So hedgerow regulations, forget it. It then goes on if it has a length of this and a something of that. But if it isn't in any of the first ones, and this is where the DEFRA guidance goes wrong, it tends to suggest that if you fall into either, you're covered. The regulation is quite clear. If you're not one of the first ones that I've just read out, it's not. And I did say subject to paragraph 3, subparagraph 3, that is, these regulations do not apply to any hedgerow within the curtilage of or marking a boundary of the curtilage of a dwelling house. In other words, none to do with us. So they don't apply to us because we're not keeping horses, ponies, we're not a SSSI, it's not the village green, it's often called it, but it isn't. the village green is by law at Jubilee Field, or Fields, whichever it is. Okay, so hedgerow regulations, forget it.
Yeah, and that was just an example, but my comment was still the same, that we need to be sure
we do.
We've
that's
considered
one reason
all
why,
those different.
That's one reason why I talked to the AONB unit, and what she said to me today was they don't have any. She said there's no enforcement, but basically we have to consider the AONB, but we are not obliged to say no because of the AONB. But what we don't want to do is drive a coach and horses through it either. No. So the issue really is what the AONB is concerned about. We have had stuff sent to us by Gillian again, which was on, I can't think of it, it must be here where, if I find her sheet. It's a particular policy which I've looked at, and the lady was referring to with me. FH2, to maintain the pattern of small irregularly shaped fields bounded by hedgerows and woodlands, and of course along the front of Coronation Field and along the green, it's already defined by the road. Strangely enough, the one that could have fallen into that is the one that was taken out by the council 20 or 30 years ago, which I think would possibly go back even before the AONB anyway. But the one between the green and the Coronation Field did define a field boundary, but it's gone. And we haven't, they're opened up. The ones around the outside obviously don't define anything because, well, sorry, not the ones along the road. I mean, the ones sort of gardens you could say do, but we're not talking about them. The one down by Miriam's, for instance, that defines the edge of the field. But when you come to a road, the road defines it.
This is what I've had from Ashford. I started off by asking about it being in a conservation area, and this was from Planning Help. A hedgerow in a conservation area is not normally protected. However, trees growing within a hedge or an old hedge which has become a line of trees of reasonable height may be protected. If the hedges are countryside hedgerows, agricultural hedges between around fields, the removal will be regulated under the hedgerow regulations, 1997, which obviously it wasn't. So then I went on to Phil Cook, who is the arboricultural officer at Ashford now. It used to be Linda Cross we used to talk to, it's now Phil Cook. And I asked him, at its last meeting, the council agreed to look into whether it would actually be legally possible to do this, just take out the hedge before coming to any decisions as to whether to take this forward as a project or not. Are you able to advise, please? He's coming back. Thank you for your email. Having checked the legislation, if you are this is the hedgerows. If you are satisfied that your open space areas do not meet the legal definition of village green or common land as defined in law, then it would not be necessary to obtain consent. And he finishes, this will be a difficult decision to make as there are many benefits to hedging, not least their wildlife value.
Which we know.
Yeah. That's what I got.
Okay. Although usually better if they're not against the road. Okay, now you've seen the pros and cons that went round earlier. The question really, I think we all want to see a credible, compiled version of what pros and cons we've got in what circumstances and all the rest of it, and it ain't going to come out of thin air. I've got the two of them. I did the original one, and David has got some extras which can be combined. Does anyone have any views on exactly how we move forward to a better list? Because David isn't here unless he gets here later. I
said at the beginning, I think you've got to have some firm proposals or alternatives. You could have more than two alternatives, I don't know, about what we're proposing. Okay. You can then, for each one, come up with your pros and cons. You can then, for each one, ask people what they think about it. Because at the moment, people are either thinking about keeping all the hedge or getting rid of all the hedge, and it doesn't seem
which
to
we're
be...
not necessarily. No, we may actually do either of them, but we may do several versions. I mean, I've got
an idea that would actually achieve nearly everything that people want without removing any of the hedge, but making bits a bit lower than it is now. But, so, for example.
I think one of the positive things that's come out of this so far is the communication on members of the parish. you know, the interest which has been developed irrespective of that. And I take what Miriam's saying regarding engaging with the parish to make sure that in practice whatever we come up with is a collective response. And I also agree with Phil that I think we should have concrete proposals, more than one, because Phil's made observations tonight which is in line with what you're saying. So, you know, I would like Parish Council to agree to proceed with the situation and encourage people to make concrete proposals that we can clearly identify and work through and make a recommendation to the village through the Parish Council to say this is the direction we think we should be moving.
Sorry, have people making proposals on the way?
Whoever wants to make the proposals at this stage, but they've got to be concrete proposals. You know, Mrs. Everett made a concrete proposal. Phil's made a suggestion tonight, which is in line with what George is suggesting. George is coming up with. There could be other proposals regarding both siting and the fencing and everything else. I think we should be encouraging that within a time scale for people to come forward and make those clear recommendations and then to get engagement. I don't think this is another incident that it could easily get into drift again, and we'll be discussing this in 12 months' time.
Well, it could. You're right. It is actually quite a difficult, it's of a class of decisions that is difficult because, and I only raise this as being of the same class, I'm not trying to make a political point, it's a bit like Brexit. If you wanted to stay, it was an absolutely clear decision because nothing changes. It's easy. So you've got a pile of stay, absolutely clear. The leave, in that instance, or the cut the fence down, people can say I like it, but they can like 6 different versions. And it's very hard, as George has already pointed out, to say, well, which one are we looking at the moment? And when you start weighing them against each other, nothing is easy. Nothing, quote, is easy. Doing something does fall into different piles, and you can satisfy some people with one of them and different people with a different one, and maybe everyone will be sort of happy with a bit of a, or not. It is tricky. Okay, thank you, Colin. Well, we've got George saying we've got to carry on doing our checking, and that's completely right. Some of that may, of course, depend on exactly what we want to do, but I think most of it is doing anything either is an issue or isn't. We've got to finish that off and try and come up with classes of proposals.
I think to narrow it down and get clear proposals. Now, if Phil was to put one in conjunction with George's example, then you have two proposals you can really consider in depth.
Plus the original one. Plus the original one.
Yeah, well, I'm encouraging the original one. I think Mrs. Everett should stand anyway because she's taken the trouble to do that work, produce all the evidence, including the photographs and the suggestion. We have, in a sense, sought clarification on certain points. Yet Phil rightly said that there's a way that he can move it forward, which is not dissimilar to what George is saying, which could become a second proposal. And there may be somebody out there, or maybe other people out there, willing to put something else together within a time frame, because I don't think it can drift.
And there are also, as I said in the earlier part, when we had the public session on, there are some of the variants available which pros or cons attach themselves to and others that don't. So to take the simplest example, as I said before, if the issue is about the road junction and the traffic safety, which is definitely an issue, then of course that attaches itself more to the green than it does to Coronation Field. It may attach a bit to Coronation Field, but logically it tends to attach itself to the green because that's the bit that's right there with the war memorial. However, even then, we have got to, as Phil said, be careful to make sure that we don't go looking for something that's not attainable. In other words, if the sight lines don't actually get any better, then it's not a reason for not doing it, but it isn't a reason for doing it. In other words, it just ceases to be a pro. we've got to work that out.
So what are we going to do next?
I shall go away and scream. I think that I think probably I'm quite keen personally anyway, and I've got more time than some of you. I think I ought to go and have another look at it. I have had a look, but another look. I've talked about having a look at it with Derek Harmon, the reason being that he is closely acquainted with exactly what has been where when. He has said, by the way, that when he moved here in '69 it was post and rail along Coronation Field. I know that Pat's brother, is it, thinks it was there before, but he says, well, I only moved in '69 and I remember the post and rail. So, you know, we've got a choice.
It could have been an inspection.
Yeah.
It's a village, things happen.
They do, yeah. So, okay, so he is willing to come along and say what is where and all the rest of it. I can try and associate the pros and cons with some possibilities, and I can talk to Phil and I can talk to Caroline and see what I can put together.
I'm quite happy to meet with you as well to tell you what my proposal might be.
Fine, okay, good. Anybody else? Very welcome, really. The only thing is that the more people arrive, then the harder it is to understand what each other's saying or thinking.
The smaller the group, the better at the stage.
Yeah.
Okay.
With some clarity.
Right, so George and me and Derek and having a look. One of the interesting things there is the slope.
Yeah,
the slope, not just the slope, the fact that land
different heights
vary,
yeah,
and I think that's something we do need to get our minds round. And if we were not just Wittersham PC, we'd look at a proper survey. Trouble is, proper survey equals money. Thanks for coming.
Maybe we could find some friendly sixth formers or college students that need a project.
Good idea.
Or a university student, final year.
Yeah. We're a bit of a long way from Canterbury.
Well, you may not need to look at Canterbury. You find an individual who has the space to do it.
That's it. Yeah.
If anyone can think of one, yes. Civil engineers do all still, I think, have to go out and use a theodolite a little bit, and they all hate it.
Lasers, or even geography A level students.
They wouldn't have a theodolite, would they?
No, they would.
Anyway.
Really? No. I bow to your greater understanding.
Remember doing it?
No. I thought you were supposed to be a doctor, not a geographer. Is that what was wrong? Right. Okay, so let's move on from that then. The next thing is updating on progress on invoices. Now, I did bring, because I think we need to go through them. I hope I brought. Okay, here we are. Yeah, that can all go over there. So I brought these for you. Thank you. Colin,
sorry.
Thanks for coming. Bye bye. Okay, I've done this again, and I think we need to go through them because when I looked at it, one or two of them, and there's Jennifer here to keep us honest. One or two of them, I think we possibly need to go backwards on because I think that they've sort of died or withered on the vine. So we haven't unfortunately got David here for the first bits. But faster broadband, I think we can say, I mean, obviously their talks are going on in the background. I'm just thinking of the colours that we're giving to it. So faster broadband, I think, is quite properly yellow still, amber. And village website, yeah, kind of. We're no nearer on a community one though. Wi-Fi is done.
Well, then we'd say reverse that to not achieve because no one's ever been able to use it. So. It's only achieved it's been able to be used by all these people. You haven't, not actually available to
that's entirely right. It's in this steel box, and you being the parish village hall man.
The village hall committee are also saying they don't know where it is or how to access it, so we have asked for the Film Society to let us have a key to their cupboard where it evidently is housed. and see if we can get in and sort it out. So that's the issue. Yeah. I'm only being pedantic and saying that really it's not available.
No, you're quite right.
It's not available.
You're quite
moment,
right.
so
But I knew that there was a bog up somewhere, but I didn't know. I knew it was in a steel cabinet, but I didn't know that the problem was it was in the film.
It's in the film cover.
Trouble is, if it wasn't in there, which is the secure place, then it's open to nickerage, isn't it?
I think that's unlikely, really. Lots of places have them sticking on the wall and they stay there. But anyway, we can.
Well,
I'm working on that one. Can we just say that?
Yeah.
I've got the paperwork that we had at the beginning because Parish Council paid it, so I can let you have copies of that.
So presumably John is the person who's got the key, and presumably it needs a bit of telephonic electric string to get it to be somewhere else.
We've got one of the Film Society's members on our committee as well now.
Indeed.
So we've got another route there that we're hoping to get access.
So I think it's it's installed, so it's
that one. So
go to Amber. Go to Amber. Okay, right. Twitter is a no, and we talked about this a while ago, and we took the view that it was not on the agenda for us because of the problems with Twitter. Outlook on Oxney, that would only happen if we get a community website and someone who's willing to put the time in to do it. It's not going to happen, I think I'm right in saying, with the existing highly laudable Outlook committee. Yes is a no, I think. It's not. Yes, it's not.
Independent website,
Notice boards is done. Mobile phone coverage, that's going to. Are we raising that tonight? I can't remember. What did you say? We can talk about it.
No.
Didn't say it.
No.
I will mention it under planning, but it's only a mention, not anything. Well,
what we're alluding to is that the phone mast, which was going to be put up somewhere else, and then Ashford wouldn't allow it. They're now talking about a new place, but it's only just come in today.
I haven't actually got it.
No, it's actually sort of. So this one is kind of. It's moving along. Partially achieved is probably a bit optimistic, to be honest. But there is a mast proposal kicking about again.
Initiated might be a better word.
I've only got 3 colours.
I'll type it.
Okay. Care in the community. Well, what can we say, Alan?
Well, indeed, but I'm yesterday's man, so I don't really know what.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all?
Well, Judy and I have had a conversation about this, and we think there might be a possibility of doing something with that, and also something else we can't see now. When the servery may be up and running in the church, there could be the opportunity to bring in things like that then. Obviously it's not going to happen overnight, but
it almost here, I think, begs the question of what we mean by care in the community.
They're looking for something, aren't they?
The willingness by the surgery, what do they actually offer? Does anybody know?
Well, no.
Part of this, Alan, came, I think, from the fact that John was on the patient's panel, which you know more about than I do.
What was the CCC?
So John being on or even chairing the patient's
and you'll say
panel.
It was the CCG thing that he's involved in, not the patient.
He's the patient's panel, isn't he?
Both.
He's
involved with both.
Is he on both? Oh, okay. He's a sort of patient's rep on the other one, is he? Right.
Yeah, I didn't know.
But he picked it up through those channels anyway, that there was an issue kicking around. And of course it may have been that people were wanting to be very keen on doing it, short of much progress.
I mean, my observation is with all the new build places like Three Fields, Six Fields, the resources are going to be spread even more thinly. But there it is.
But there's an extra floor there's an extra floor to put people in who do stuff.
Okay, good.
Okay, so this one is staying on not achieved then. That's a bit beyond our knowledge. dementia, this is the one where I think partially achieved is now a little bit over-egging it, and I think really we're back to not achieved, don't you?
Nothing's happened.
Fits with the diagnosis, doesn't it?
Yeah. Wheeled and Wheels, not achieved. Isolation within the community, I think the Lunch and Social Club is perfectly fair and it's an achievement, and it's very good. Adult fitness equipment, well, presently unachievable is the tennis courts, because we put in more adult fitness equipment, but the 106 is blown away, so that stays as it is. The adult fitness equipment is the next one, achieved. The pet care scheme, not achieved, very difficult to make much of. I think my honest appraisal would be that there are close-knit groups within the village, but the village is not close-knit.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
And I think that would be more important because of the percentages.
Has somebody suggested tennis courts for the village?
It was being talked about at the time of the Piper's application as a 106 thing, although we never, the 106 was agreed between Ashford and Landia, and we got very little out of it. I mean, even to the extent, very irritatingly, that the money that KCC demanded for the primary school was going to be given to Tenterden and not Wittersham, which was outrageous, but that's what they did.
The other area at the time.
It was a complete fix because it's a C of E school, therefore they wanted the money for themselves.
So this is not unusual with ABC or something.
Yeah.
The other time this was mentioned was on the amenities group that I was on, and that was one of the things that was on the list of possible sports we could develop within the village.
Yeah.
And
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It really is really like we should have tennis court or two.
Public ones,
Yeah.
Got
Yeah.
several.
Can you define section 106? I'm sorry.
Section 106, it's in the middle of changing, but it hasn't done. In the old days, 106 under the Town and Country Planning Act was that Ashford, as the planning authority, could do a deal with Tesco to, you can build your new Tesco or you can enlarge your Tesco if you want planning permission for it, but we require you to pay money to have a roundabout outside, and we require you to put in some more pavements, and we require you to do something and something. And all those things are supposed to be kind of related to the project, not merely, I would quite like something for the cinema. They're changing that to community infrastructure levy under the newer planning rules that came in the coalition time, but it's up to councils to adopt them. Ashford has not adopted community infrastructure levy, and the government, before the election anyway, was talking about changing it again. The thing about CIL is that if they take any money for CIL, we have to get a bit of it. Minimum, I think, 5%, maximum 15%. But something like that. But they haven't adopted it.
Also go back to what the conversation we were having earlier about care in the community, that if a big housing development, for example, that money could be used for increased
day facility or whatever.
Yeah, for surgeries, for schools, for all sorts of community things.
Well, if you think of Chilmington Green, they'll be taking a bunch of money to build schools, surgeries, and all and sundry. That's 106, Alan, as I understand it.
It seems it could be useful in the future.
Okay, so where did we get?
Transport.
We're on to transport, right. Speeding through the village. Well, this is obviously all coming with the SIDS, because SIDS will give us not quite the same community speed watch group as Mary originally envisaged, which was the portable one you plonk on the grass, but you will have the opportunity to do something similar.
Did you see the lady on the television the other night with her hairdryer standing in her garden?
Oh yeah.
Cars going by and slowing down. It was really funny.
PCC to ask highways what sort of traffic calming might be acceptable. Well, not achieved. I think it's fair to say probably unachievable. But Jennifer will confirm that I've said as much at voices groups, but I've always been shouted at.
Why would we think it's unachievable?
Because Kent generally won't allow things like that, and or if they did, they'd certainly want us to pay for them, and they are mammoth costs. But
Things
in
like
general,
islands and-
you can't, I mean, even Kent can't just go around doing them where they want. They've got to fulfil certain rules, and they'll say that we don't.
Do you think it's worth, when we're going through these things, when we're saying things are not achieved or unachievable, and things like the pet care scheme that we don't really seem to know even what it means, we could send that back to the group and perhaps be asked occasionally things to be taken off this list because they're never going to be achieved.
Well, I think in a way, this is a bit of tail wagging dog, and I acknowledge that. We're going through here saying, look, let's update these colours a bit. But actually what should really be doing it is the discussions that you're having.
Yeah.
That should be, but I'm a bit keen to at least go through this month. Otherwise, for another month, we've done nothing. This is a bit.
I wanted to ask a question about the speed because I drove through Lamberhurst the other day, and they have got these half the road is obstructed and so on. I mean, it would be perhaps to ask their parish council how they achieved it and at what cost. Is that something we are able to do?
Sure. I mean, Yvonne can ask KCC what their position would be in terms of how many accidents they need or whatever, and how much they would want to charge.
Nice to know.
They may even say, well, actually, the last time we did a traffic survey in Wittersham, there were only 100 cars an hour, and we don't consider it less than 500 cars an hour, or, you know.
I suspect we've got a lot more traffic than Lamberhurst has.
Because Lamberhurst's got bypass.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Yvonne can ask.
What have they got there?
Chicane.
Chicane.
Same as the entrance to Leeds and
Leeds Castle is a good example. Yeah.
All those, right.
I haven't actually printed it out because when Paul was doing this, when he took it on, he asked me, he said, what should he do, where it says PC to ask KCC Highways. Well, at the time, I did ask them, and I got the answers.
Oh, right.
And I forwarded that to him, but I haven't actually got a copy of it. So I did all the things where we were going to ask, and I got answers to, which I forwarded to him. So if he'd been here, he could have answered these.
Well, we don't have to change it just for the sake of it, so I don't mind leaving it. We're doing what we can.
I think it would be better if then because where it does say PC to ask, I did.
Okay. The Stocks Road one is not achieved, and which was, of course, again with Pipers, they were going to do it. What we have at the moment, which is a sort of a half a loaf rather than that, or a third of a loaf, is Tilehouse. If Tilehouse Orchard gets given, they'll have to do a bit of path. Won't be as much, but it'll be a bit. I presume. I mean, that's if they're told to, but logically they.
We need to lobby the council at the time, don't we, to decide what we want them to.
That was, I think I'm right in saying that was on there at the time. Yeah. Mind you, it was a bit complicated because we've had 3 versions of Tilehouse Orchard, haven't we? We've had the original one that was turned down, the second one that is not actually decided yet, and then the first one went to appeal, which hasn't been decided yet.
I've not been on the parish council long, but for instance, with say Tilehouse, which we supported, I suppose we could have put a caveat in. We would support it if they will provide the following things, and we don't seem to do that.
We are in a position to do that, and we do sometimes make comments that we want this or want that. And to be honest, I cannot remember what we did in that particular instance. It'll be on the website.
I think there wasn't there a footway?
I think that there was one put in. It would be very unusual for the builder to put in 2 houses with no footpath, because it just makes it hard for them to sell them.
We could have asked them for a tennis court.
Yes, you wouldn't have got. Okay, let's move on. So we've then got the parking review.
That's another one that
The minibus service we moved, okay, up to 2.3. Antisocial behaviour, PCSO and community warden. Well, that triggers a point worth mentioning. We're still waiting for any progress on our new assistant community warden, volunteer community warden. They haven't run the training yet, and they were supposedly about to do the DBS checks, but I don't think they have, or I didn't hear if they did.
haven't completed them yet. Was the last?
Yeah, haven't completed them, meaning they haven't completed the applications. Probably they're saying they want more applicants before they can make progress, but everyone's just getting bored.
I think the other issue with antisocial behaviour is we're never going to put achieved against it, are we? Because there will always be something, I guess, going on. But I think, to be fair to the PCSO, they did look at it, and it has diminished dramatically. I think since they've done that, and it would only be, fair to them to say partially achieved. At least it makes them look like they've done something. Then
I think they react if things are reported to them. They do react. It's stopping it in the first place is more difficult.
I mean, antisocial behaviour is one of those things where you don't actually stop it. You persuade the people that they don't wish to do it anymore because they've got someone.
They grow out of it.
Yeah. Okay, I'll change that one then.
That just seems fairer to me. To them, for
that's
them.
Good point. Good point. Neighbourhood Watch is invited to our 2016 annual parish meeting when it will be a subject for discussion. I have no idea what happened.
We didn't.
Didn't happen.
He was invited. If you remember, that was our one visit.
Oh right.
It was Andrew Hoodless who turned up, said he was going to do wonderful things, and then never seen again.
So what we need to do then is to cross out the.
But we do have. You see, Neighbourhood Watch. We do have Alex, but every time I sort of talk to him about it, he says, "You're acting. I'm only helping. I'm not. We need." A Neighbourhood Watch coordinator. He's something and he does forward stuff, but he would like to have.
So if we put down PV to raise with, because he's our police rep, with police, and then we'll see where we get to. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Can you point that out to him, that we've given him that job? I mean, he's keen to get his parish police forum going again as well.
But what can he do? I'm not sure what you're wanting him to do.
Well,
because Neighbourhood Watch isn't under a... You need a coordinator. That's what you need. Passing
people around the village, don't you? Like under the coordinator.
Yes. Yeah. You see, Alex is just your acting coordinator. He doesn't want responsibility of being the coordinator. So. What would you expect Paul to be able to do about it?
Okay, so if that's the problem, then there's no point really saying that it was all going to depend on the PCSO coming to the annual parish meeting, even if he hadn't been someone who went after another week.
That's my point earlier about getting the groups to revisit these things and update them maybe. I think you're right. Yeah.
I mean, if it's really to do with us finding volunteers, there's no point asking the policeman about it. I thought the point was that we needed the police to say, okay, we can... do something or whatever.
I think the fact that we actually have somebody in the village that is doing it.
Well, we've got to change this because obviously this is daft since it's the 2016 awaiting review. Okay. School transport. That's the last chairman, by the way, not me. I presume this could have been to do with the difficulty of getting into Homewood.
Yeah, I think it was.
And what happened to the early bus that they put on? Did it stay running or did it get dropped again?
I can't say I've looked at the bus time,
No, I don't.
There's one at 8:10. My daughter goes.
Oh, well, that's better.
Time.
Yeah, but is that the Homeward bus?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this was...
A public.
It has to be
Yes,
public.
yes, it was getting them to college and
because
in
the older
Ashford and that
ones
sort
aren't
of
allowed
thing.
on the school bus anymore. That was the big problem, that the school bus was banned for children when they had to stay at school the extra 2 years. They weren't allowed to use it, we were told.
The public service bus is about 7:30.
I know, Alan, it is hard to believe.
Oh, that's the one then. Yeah, it's still, yeah.
7:15, is it? It's usually when I'm taking the dog for a walk, I see it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's still running.
Yeah, but it's still...
It is, yeah. What's this morning, anyway?
Okay.
I see it.
Well, so here, that bus is running anyway. So in a sense, depending on what the school transport was, this one is early bus achieved. It can go to green. Because if you remember, that came up after Mike Hill got barracked at the annual parish meeting 2 years ago. and he couldn't believe it, the same as Alan couldn't, that the government said that the children have to stay on longer, but at the same time said they weren't allowed to use the school buses.
Yeah.
And therefore had to have a public bus which didn't exist. Jet lagged.
Something like that.
Public transport to be available at the end of school hours.
Right, this is mine. Can I just, I'll just speak to these because I met with Mary.
Oh, excellent.
And we looked at that because 4.1 in fact links up with 2.3, the wheeled and wool, and also something else, minibus service. Basically, it's all a similar sort of idea. We were thinking of something. There's an organisation called Dial a Ride, and we're going to try and get a meeting with the lady that organises that to see how we could set something up in Wittersham for that. So that would begin to look at that issue.
Dial a Ride is an organisation or a bus company?
It's an organisation. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Is it right?
I just said got it right.
Yeah, but they go. I think you can either use what exists, or you could set up something similar to them, and we just want to talk to her about how that might happen. So I only met with Mary last week, so we're in the process of doing that.
Right.
The supporting the amenities using the village website.
4.2.
We think that started to happen with the list that Yvonne's compiling of all the different things that are in the village. We also wondered about whether to have something like a trade fair, in inverted commas, where we had something in the village hall and invited all the organisations in Wittersham to come along and just,
like Freshers Week.
Yeah, very similar, yes, but without the beer. Yeah, and to come along and just tell people what they tell people what they do, and perhaps have something here, or perhaps have something at the school, or for different age groups and things like that. So that was something else we thought about. So we're looking into that. I also suggested, because when we had the amenities group, we were going to do a survey among teenagers about what they felt they liked in the village and what they felt it was lacking, and I suggested that we do a bus survey initially, and perhaps give the voices will pay for some cards to be printed, and it might just ask 3 questions. What do you think? What do you like that's available in the village? What do you think ought to be made available? Or perhaps give a menu of different things that tick these boxes that you think might be useful to have. And whether
what do you mean a bus survey? What's that mean?
Well, and what we're going to do then is give it to, like my daughter gets the home bus, she can take a pack and give them to the kids on there. Someone else can do the ones for the Ashford children. So all the ones that are the Wittersham children, teenagers, we can hit in that way, and then do something similar through the school for the younger children as well.
This did happen when they were talking about a youth club. The Tenterden, what was his name? He came out and he was putting giving things to the school bus to what they, once again it's similar, what did they want in the village, but that never really
do that. And also do an under 5s mums one as well, one for the under 5 mums, because that seems to be a sort of bit of a gap in the thing. And then we looked at 4.3 and decided not to do anything about that at the moment until present situations have been resolved, really. Don't we just leave anything to do with that alone? But we did think about other sports that we could do, which have already been started already. I think quick cricket and short tennis, and perhaps walking football was another one. For the older age group, might be another possibility to do something down there on the sports field. So walking football.
Yeah.
It's like football in slow motion.
I've definitely seen an advert.
You were probably just watching England play.
That's developing ideas for new sports, which obviously means talking to the sports club. I was lobbied just yesterday by someone, the hoary old favourite, let's say, in a skate park, a skateboard thing. They said it doesn't actually need to be sort of a whoopee one, where they all break their necks. If it was just anywhere, and Coronation Field was being pointed to, anywhere where it's just got enough hard standing that they can go up and down on their skateboards rather than on the roads.
Just need to metal frame some plywood, bent plywood, really. That's all we need.
I shall leave that to your greater expertise. Okay, right. So then we get on to housing. We've achieved the first one.
I've had 2 meetings with Richard, and I've got the names here, and by the end of the summer I will have had meetings with Angela and John and reviewed the not achieved so far, and to see where we are.
Who's Richard?
Richard.
You said you met with Richard, didn't you?
Yeah.
Richard, who was due shared voices.
Roger.
Sorry.
Roger. Sorry.
It's like Jeff, but I couldn't work out
It's okay, good.
I'm glad you've not gotten it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we get to Alan.
We had a meeting with Dawn and myself and Roger. And Yvonne. Yes, we talked about that. And it's really, as you see on the sheet there, that we then Yvonne put that together rather nicely. Generally put it together rather nicely.
So you're working on the reds with Roger and Sean?
Yes. Didn't quite hear that, Jeremy. Sorry, you were looking.
You're working on the red ones with Roger and Sean?
Yes, we are. Okay. We're going to meet again. We haven't defined a moment.
Okay. Right. Well, we've gone through them. We obviously hope to make more progress, and some of them will be quite long running, or not.
Yeah. Or not. Yeah.
But what we do need to do is sort of just keep it a bit like you were saying earlier, Colin, about the ones that just stall. I mean, if we can sort of tick them off here and there gradually, then we're making progress on what the community have said they'd like. And I think it's quite handy. George has come up with extra ideas that aren't even listed, and by all means, if you sort that out with Mary, give me extra ones to put in, you know.
But it needs to move forward. It's a live document, isn't it? It needs to be moving forward all the time.
Yeah, one of the difficulties that we have is that we get to the parish council meeting and discuss it, and then it's sort of too late until the next time, and then the same thing repeats itself. Okay, thank you for all of that. Jennifer can tell Roger that I did my best. Right. Otherwise he gets ratty. To consider the council's approach to producing a policy on safeguarding. Now, you all, I think, got what came through from Yvonne, which was a note from our liaison person at ABC, Michelle, telling us that we've got to do it. She is the person who handles grants, and we ain't getting any more grants until we've done it. So it's definitely, you know, got to be done. We've got the guidance to safeguarding, and then we've got two possible, I think to call them templates is too strong, but two kind of ideas of what might be done. I think this is a difficult area. Obviously safeguarding is the sort of panic of the decade, not entirely wrongly, but in some places it tends to go overboard. I suspect that we don't actually have a safeguarding problem, but we have a safeguarding policy gap. In other words, we probably would do most of the things, but we haven't got something in our little red book, that, or blue book or black book, according to which one you've got, which says, oh yeah, we do this and that. I also think, subject to other people's views, that the key here is to stress that we are completely committed to keeping children and vulnerable adults safe. That is, and that we have objectives on what to do, and that we will not, I mean, the absolute bottom line, of course, is that if you're worried about something, you don't cover it up, you get on with it. Although I know that these things, I don't know actually, I believe that these things can be very difficult, and Alan will know all about that for sure, and I imagine you do, George. But what I then suspect is better is to avoid being too prescriptive. One of the policies here is better than the other in that respect. The more prescriptive you are, the less likely you are to actually follow it, because you just won't have in your mind all the things, the boxes you have to tick. If you have a safeguarding situation, you are as likely as not going to think, oh, I better do this and I better do that, rather than, oh, let me go and see what it says in the policy. And the other thing is that you can trip over where you have all sorts of prescriptions which just don't apply to the circumstances that will come up. You'd have arguments about it afterwards. But apart from those preliminary comments, which is about all I can offer, I think that George, you're probably the nearest to expert.
I was going to offer
this.
to write the policy for your perusal.
And I imagine that possibly yourself, because you had vulnerable young people under your control, didn't you? And Alan, of course, with his experience in the surgery, you're probably the people who are going to be best at
well, the school would
adding
people
bits.
would really have a good grasp of this, wouldn't they?
All right.
I'm a school governor and two schools, and I'm responsible for safeguarding.
Oh, really? Ideal.
So he's 2/3 the way through already.
Yeah.
And that used to be my job before.
Here's one he prepared. Here's one he prepared earlier.
It's now mandatory that all school governors take an additional scheme.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I'm quite happy to draft
Please
something
do.
for people.
I was hoping you would.
Yeah. Okay.
I was going to suggest you.
No.
But I'm delighted that you volunteered.
Volunteer first.
A volunteer is worth several pressed men, as they say. Okay, that's good. Thank you for that. The next one is the report on the land for the cemetery extension. This is, as we discussed, I think, last time, the financial regulations which we approved last time on perusal, which Yvonne and I did as the working party, actually require a report if we're acquiring any land, even though we're not paying for it. And therefore reviewing the financial regs was very helpful because it reminded us it had to be done. And I have produced a report. It's pretty straightforward really, because we ain't paying for it other than we pay for what we do with it, obviously. We have to pay the solicitor's costs and the agent's costs, but that's it. We're not paying for the land, and it's the only sensible place to be doing it. It's not as though, you know, we have a business case of which one we want. But we do have to have a report, so this is it. And unless anyone has got suggestions of things that should be added to it, changed or deleted, if someone can propose and second that, that would be helpful. Colin's proposing, George is seconding, and is everyone happy with it?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so that's a bit of ticking box. Good, thank you very much. The next one is quite a complicated one in some ways. This goes back to when Yvonne attended the CALP meeting when I was on holiday. No one else, if you remember, was available. And a couple of 3 weeks ago, Shaddockshurst, I'd already heard, and I don't know the village at all, so it's quite near Ashford. They are deeply upset because Ashford granted planning for houses in what they regarded as their last open space in the middle of the village. And they were well peed off about it. So they are putting forward a proposal to Ashford and asking everyone else to support it, saying this, that and the other ought to be done. I think this is right, isn't it? What makes it a little bit complicated is the fact that in this particular instance we are in a different situation. It's not that we are completely safe from the same thing happening, but we are in the A and B and they're not. So to the extent, I did say at the time I hadn't turned it on. And of course you run on batteries. Pretty clever.
No.
Not personally.
As long as your battery's not running down. So we have a different situation, but we're being asked to go with this. I did read it at the time. I thought some of it, to be honest, was, some of it's, I won't say any of it's necessarily pushing an open door. Some of it is entirely plausible and some of it is pretty damn hopeful. You know, they're asking for things that we can obviously see, I think we can obviously see they're not very likely to get. But there is a question we're being asked to join in. The question is whether we do. What was your reading at the CALP meeting itself?
Well, he was very much wanting the support of everybody. and Ashford, themselves agreed
They
that there
didn't
was
mind.
I think it's to Ashford's advantage as well in some ways with
Okay.
developers.
Yeah.
I feel sorry in a sense that Charlotte Trust has got
Stuffed.
stuffed in with it, but because there's going to be this number of houses going in,
Yeah.
there should be as 106 money flying around left, right, and centre. And Charlotte Trust would be stupid not to see what they could get out of it.
Yeah. Well, the village, I think, was up in arms. I'm not sure if it's the chairman that I heard speaking at the previous calc, it probably was, but he was certainly very aerated about it.
Yes. Yes, I don't think they had any consultation. It just went in.
You couldn't give me the date that came in, could you possibly, just so I can identify it on my system here?
Well, it did come in again today with the calc minutes.
It's come in with calc today, the minutes.
Yes, whenever
Maybe I got an earlier version, but it
came with
the
everything
calc
else.
minutes
All
today.
my other notes.
It came with notes.
It came in a note.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can find it anyway.
But it's again in the minutes today.
I think we should support, and there's no difficulty. I think as far as we're concerned, it doesn't at this point in time affect. If circumstances change, and surely hope they don't,
Yeah, sure.
we would be asking for the same thing.
Okay.
This
So
is it, Alan. If you
Is everyone happy to go with that?
So what they're asking us to do is support what they.
It's like signing a petition.
It's
Isn't it?
like signing a petition at this stage, and if you get all the parish councillors involved with ABC, it's just part of the bigger development of Ashford.
I think Colin makes a good point as well, that we distinguish ourselves in a not very helpful way if we don't, even if it doesn't apply really.
Yeah.
We kind of might as well go with the herd.
United we stand.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're happy to do that then, everybody. Yeah, okay, thank you. You need to look and see exactly what it was we were going to do, whether we're just signifying it by an email or whether we're signing something or what. Well, I think in the minutes she's got a long list of all the councils.
yes, well that's what came. Yeah.
But I mean, if we all sign one and send it
But
back,
she also-
she's going to have 30
Yeah,
copies.
she did also ask whether it would be okay by email. I can't remember what the answer was, but I think
Right.
I've got it
You
somewhere.
do that.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is our annual membership of £20 for the Kent County Playing Fields Association, which you've had the correspondence. Do we have to agree to pay it, or
Yes,
have we done
please.
it?
No, we haven't.
Are people happy to pay the £20?
Agreed.
We're all agreed, yeah, thank you. The position of litter bins and dog bins in the village, Ashford were asking us and the clerk has already completed it. And the open space strategy, she also did that. Excellent.
I will just mention this because it came with a map, and the key there. It was 2008 data they had for informal green space, outdoor sport and play area, and they wanted me to confirm that it was as it is. Where they've got the outdoor sport is this bit, but I have added that it's a privately owned ground. And the informal green space, which is this bit, which is the green, and the Coronation Field, which is and then they've got the village green and the bit Ashford Borough Council land there, and I put on it that part of that is actually registered village green. And then they've got the bit that goes behind Jubilee Field, which I've now said part of it is housing.
Yes.
And then they've got the two bits which they call play area. So one is the play area, the Ashford play area, and the other bit is the tiny bit that has always been called a play area, but nobody has ever played in it, and it's now sort of within the bit where they're building anyway. So it was just an open bit of grass. There was no play.
But there's a swing there.
Well, not
informally.
Oh, that must have been years ago. Not for years. Yes, yeah. It just had a litter bin, which they when they put the hoarding up, they enclosed the litter bin within it. So that's when we got it out. And Alf had a spare one, so we moved it into. Yeah.
Okay.
So we've smoothed that out. So that's what I've done with
They're up to date now.
with that bit.
Good. Okay. Thank you. You had an email from Mrs. Lewis responding to your reply to the email from
which I have
Mrs. Beecham.
acknowledged, and you've all
You
seen
acknowledged
as well.
receipt, you've all had it. Okay. Authorising payments for calc, the defib pads and battery.
A copy, I'd like to read it. Have you got a copy of that? I can find it on here, but it will take me about an hour.
If you ever need anything printed out, Alan, beforehand, just let me know.
I'd like to do it on this. I'm saving paper.
You're saving paper.
Right, this is the defib fat pads.
Yeah.
I've got a sell-by date on them, and we've reached it. John did point it out to me, and the batteries within a month or two.
Yeah.
I asked Laura for a quote, but she's doing on a finance course apparently. But John, these people emailed John and told him that it was out of date. So I need to find out exactly whether Laura can do it, whether we go through Laura. But the for replacement electrodes, they call them, and a charge pack is £99 plus VAT and £9.95 delivery plus VAT.
110 quid plus VAT. And that's
So
every
are you
year,
happy
isn't
that?
it? Or every
Well,
2 years?
you know, no, it's it's not every year. But if you're happy with that, and I'll confirm.
Yeah,
There's no point having it if it's not usable.
Yeah, exactly.
indeed. So working party reports, the first one is the caretaker, what we've called here Canardington incident. You talk through that? Or do you want me to?
You talk through it.
Well, I will talk it through, but when I tried to write it up, then I kept being told I got it wrong. So Yvonne will tell me when I go off piste. While I was on holiday, I had nothing to do with this. I was in France. While I was on holiday, 2 issues blew up with Alf, the caretaker, in the Wish, the big Wish you call it, don't you? Which is the L-shaped one, where if you go up there in Canardington, on the left-hand side, there's a big slopey bit of grass that goes up to the path and then the houses. And that's Ashford land, and it's part of what Alf cuts and Ashford pay us to do on the slope. And there's a lot of it.
Yes.
So Alf has got his motor mower going up and down and back and forth. And the people park along the road. And one particular house, number 14, the Wish, as I recall, they made a complaint afterwards to Yvonne that the woman said there's a Mercedes and a Jaguar there. Yeah?
There's only one car, she said my car.
Yeah, but I mean they have the 2, we're told. And she said in correspondence to Yvonne that she'd just had her car valeted for some special reason, which cost £140, I quote, and it got covered in grass. So she wanted us to pay for it. And Yvonne went back very conciliatory and said, yeah, of course, having a bill for washing the outside. Before we got any further with that, I think, Alf was there again and cutting. And she came out, the lady, and then the husband, or partner, I should say, I don't know if it's a husband, and berated Alf about covering it with grass again. And then afterwards also saying that the wheels were chipped with stones, all done by Alf. About the end of this time, along came the valeter to valet it. Maybe from the first time, who knows. During that confrontation, Alf has reported that the male was very confrontational, threatening him with violence, etc., in his face, as they say. Alf made a formal complaint to Yvonne as an employee to his employer, saying, I don't expect to have to put up with this, in effect. I shorten it. we are in the middle of drafting, Yvonne is going to correct it a bit more, a note to Ashford as our client for that grass, telling them what happened and asking them for support in that situation, which I think we will get. But before that, I also rang Keith Ashby, who's chairman of Carnarvonton, and told him about the whole thing. He already knew of the house and the individual because they'd had issues before. And he was kind of sympathetic and recognises Alf's qualities. So he's standing up for us. But we need, obviously, to get something into Ashford. It's been quite slow so far, my fault largely. When I got back from holiday and got briefed and all the rest of it, and then got corrected, and then another go, and Yvonne's going to make some more changes to it. It's a bit tricky, ultimately, because they have to park in the road. There's nowhere else. The second time when they said he'd covered it with grass again and chipped the wheels, they complained that he hadn't told them that he was cutting, but they acknowledged that they'd heard him mowing up and down. Right. And he takes some trouble to try and avoid the grass going on the car. The line, I think, that has to be taken with Ashford, but it's not easy, is to say to them, I trust Ashford, you agree with us, that if people park on the road, they get what they get, whether it be pigeons, muddy puddles, or grass from grass cutters. You have no right to park on the road and then expect not to be assailed by daily life. Obviously, if someone drives into the car, that's another matter. But otherwise, as long as they're on the road, they get what they get.
I think as long as we're taking reasonable
care, exactly.
If you're using a strimmer right next to a car, that's going to be a different issue to using a mower, isn't it?
Indeed. And Alf does it around in a circle so that he's trying to blow the grass inwards, but the trouble is, it's on a slope, some of it still goes down the hill.
And depending on the winds in what direction you're suffering.
Of course, all true. And obviously the threats and all the rest of it didn't help. The other thing is that Keith has confirmed today, Yvonne, that yellow lines are going in. So they're going to have more trouble parking in their own road anyway, because it'll pack everything up from the corner. The yellow line, I think, will only be around the corner.
But it will do for the grass.
It won't be where they park, but I think to the extent that people are coming too near the bend, which is what they don't like, and the bin wagon can't get round the bend, he's going to push them up. And whether they have enough room to fit still, I don't know. I've only been and had a look at it once.
I mean, they'd be the first to complain if the grass wasn't cut.
Of course they would, which is what's happening at the minute, by the way.
Well, I was going to say, we've got a duty of care to Al, so I think we must insist that he doesn't go back there until we've got some satisfactory resolution from Ashford.
Yeah. Agreed.
Does Al cut the grass on a specific day? It's just where it's convenient.
One of the great benefits of having the caretaker scheme rather than having it on landscape services is he can cut it when he thinks it needs it.
Which goes more frequent than if you had a regular service.
Indeed. Good.
So they would benefit.
Okay. So the key really tonight was that you should all know, it's been reported properly, it's been aired in public, and we carry on with what we're doing. I did share it with Carnarvonton for the same reason. And I have said, by the way, that Keith will get a copy of the letter to Ashford because it's his parish.
I think that's fair.
It's his parish.
Supporting it.
And Keith is very good, by the way. Yeah. He's a very crusty old farmer.
And I would agree with George. We shouldn't return to do cutting until the resolution's been resolved.
Yeah. Well, he's doing part of it, but he's sort of missing out a bit, which is a problem.
I understand your seat.
Yeah.
And we agreed that that a £15 for cleaning the outside of the car was reasonable.
I suggested that because they possibly sent a bill, but the bill came out as gobbledygook. It's just sort of symbols. So I suggested that Yvonne hasn't paid it yet. That I said, 15 quid to wash a car should be reasonable. I get mine done in Tesco, my Mercedes, for £6. What?
I expect it will be more when you actually see what they're sending you.
Yes.
£140 does seem rather a lot these days.
Well, we did form, without direct evidence, we did form the loose opinion that there was a bit of taking the what's it here.
Interesting. I think 10 years ago that might have been the going rate, but it's been undercut by our colleagues.
Well, even if it was £140 to have the whole thing absolutely pristine, he didn't get glass inside it.
Depends on one side of it.
You must remember his windows.
Okay.
Or a sunroof.
All of that. Okay, the transaction statement then. Which we have got. I didn't spot anything on that.
We got the precept in.
Yeah, and the other bits. So we got the lolly. So it's a little mistake on the back I see there.
Oh yeah, but the one in file is correct.
It's good, you've corrected it, good.
It was only as I was...
You spotted it.
Yes, I just
Is everyone
corrected.
happy with that for me to sign?
Yeah.
So I'm going to sign here.
Mm-hmm. Then you've got the breakdown for the caretakers one on the other side.
Yeah.
Which is...
Okay. Good. Where are we going now? Decisions received, a list of them, the Kingsgate House, if you remember, the garage that you gave us guidance on at the time, Alan. The two garages at Lordings, which are pretty straightforward, they've both gone through. And
That's a sale, yeah.
well, I think
That's
they knew
what
it
we-
at the time, actually.
Yeah,
didn't they?
expected.
And Little Acton, at Acton Lane, they withdrew the access changes, didn't they, and got the rest granted.
So yes, I haven't got anything more. That's it. Can I just go back to the finance?
Oh, yeah.
It's just that this came in today. It's a report from the internal auditor. Not very much.
Oh, yeah.
Having recently conducted the internal audit of the parish council's accounts and records, I'm pleased to tell you I found them to be very well kept, as always, and completely in order.
Good.
Well done, thank you.
So I'll do an official thank you from everybody for that.
Right. Okay. Highways. We don't have Paul here. Does anyone have anything on highways? No?
Only just to say that you've all noticed the water coming through the road again.
Yeah.
What, near the antique shop?
Father Triangle.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Have you not?
No.
Yes. Big wet patch.
Well,
It's
I probably
great.
saw it, but didn't think, oh, that's got a leak again.
Yes. Well, if you remember, it happened last year and then
Yeah.
stopped,
Yeah.
and it's here again. So there wasn't anything on the fault reporting thing, that no box to tick on that water coming through the road. So I wrote to our highway steward and reported it to him, and he came back and said he had noticed it himself, and he's reported it to the drainage team.
Oh, in other words, nothing.
Nothing will get done.
Is it a draining issue?
So we'll all disappear down a big hole one day going up there, won't we?
It'll be a bus, won't it?
But it was. But who was it? Who was it I spoke to about it? So they reported it to South East Water.
That would make more sense.
Is that good?
But we don't think it is.
Well, you
a
might
water
get,
main.
but I don't think it is. No, I don't think it
Usually
is.
been
But
thought
they,
of to be a spring.
yes, I think it springs.
Which is amazing when we haven't had rain for so long that it's suddenly sprung up again, literally.
Ah, the spring has sprung.
Yeah, it's
Right, okay. Public rights of way. I haven't got anything.
Vegetation clearance hasn't started yet. Should have been.
There was a bit vegetation clearing.
Where?
Oh, not on Pro, on the highway. I saw.
Oh
today,
yes,
yeah.
they've done the edge of the Burgesses, but not as fast because Mary
Yeah.
Pacey said.
Those gates that were locked.
Yes, they're all done. That's
All done,
reported
yeah.
last
Down
meeting.
the river.
Away, you see. You know, you mentioned it, and I.
No, it's locked gates.
The ones by the river.
Yeah,
Yep,
we
they're all-
mentioned that was the last meeting.
In your if you've read your minutes,
Yeah.
Is that
I may have done it in my minutes, so that was an obscure.
No, that happened.
Yeah, it has happened.
It has
yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
That was
Yes.
reasonably quickly.
You can get along there now.
I don't know
Okay.
what everyone said, but it certainly they leapt to it.
yep.
Okay.
Are over.
Open spaces. We haven't got David here. Anything on open spaces?
Not the time. No.
Cemetery and churchyard.
I would just like to add here that I've had a complaint from the school that I think it's horse chestnut tree probably, but there's a big branch going over the fence into the playing field and making it difficult for the gang mower to cut the grass.
Okay.
So I've contacted Ashford, and it will need planning permission because it's in the conservation area. So what he suggests is that if there's anything else in the churchyard that needs attention, that we put it all in together. So I need to.
We're only taking a branch off, and it still needs planning permission, even that.
Yes.
Even maybe that danger for children.
Yes.
Or,
Yeah, well, it's not danger for children. It's just stopping the gang.
I think it's
No,
dangerous for children.
Isn't that rather? Oh dear.
Yes, it is. And in fact, last time this happened, when I went to Linda Cross, it was about the tree being in the wall, if you remember.
Yeah.
And she had, she sort of said, and I explained that it was ridiculous. So she actually said, yes, okay, no going through all the permission thing, although she did give me the form that said, yes, you can do it, as long as you replace it with another tree close by, which I went back and said, well, that's stupid because it's a wall. So she said, okay.
I'm afraid when I was in restoration and in charge of the churchyard, I would have just gone down with my chainsaw and done it.
But the parish council can't do that.
That microphone's on, you know.
Retrospectively, they're not going to come and get
Well, he would have done, but he never actually did.
No.
Right. Okay. Okay.
You're a witness, sir.
Right, the next thing is the CALP meeting, and we just got the minutes today, which you've all had. And the what is particularly interesting is to go through the update on the local plan, which, I mean, it's not an update because he's just telling everyone about the problems, which is pretty much what Yvonne and I reported after we had the meeting.
Yes, what I've just picked out. You've got all these, but just the things, just so that we can sort of minute it. That they've got another 1,200 houses, 12,700 needed to 20, but 1,200 they've got to find now from what they'd already. Yes, Ashford have got to find
another 1,200.
Another 1,200, but they've got to find. Yes, they've got to find sites for another 1,200 houses. So they've looked at emission site representations, density assumptions, new areas not previously put forward. They've considered the scale appropriate to location and services, environmental infrastructure constraints, accessibility and deliverability. The council must identify specific deliverable sites to provide for a 5-year supply. To qualify, sites must be available now, offer a suitable location for development, be realistically deliverable within the next 5 years, and financially viable. The land supply needs to be relatively small, accessible without significant constraints. Be where is strong market demand, variety of locations consistent with wider local plan strategy, plus review windfall policy. And the process, local plan revisions due to be considered by Cabinet on Thursday, 6-week public consultation starting early July, officers / councillors assess responses in the autumn, local plan submitted for examination December 17, examination hearings spring 2018. So watch this space.
And when you've looked through those, if you haven't already, when you've looked through the slides, then if you go to the main minutes, which are usually a bit tedious, there's a whole load of Q&A that he answered afterwards, which you need to look through as well.
He was very good. Lots, he answered. Questions have been sent in beforehand, which he answered, and people there were able to answer questions. So.
He does know his stuff. He's on top of his game.
But, all very unfortunate, he did admit.
One of the things that come out, I think I may have mentioned this before, it's something that was mentioned by the leader of Swale at one of the meetings I went to, the planning seminar maybe the day. The district councils, it's one of these gaming things really, the district councils understand the problem and they're asking the government to change the system so it doesn't bite the way it does at the minute. And it really, you can understand the problem. They have to do this number of houses that they've got to provide sites for. So they come up with 10,000, let's say. That's the number of houses that are needed. Now, we know that houses are not being built as fast as they're needed. That's the great problem. So they have to come up with the 10,000. They allocate the sites. The builders then only build 5,000. That leaves them with 5,000 that weren't built that have to be added on to the allocation. Obviously, they've still got the places that they allocated. If they haven't allocated enough, the gap that they didn't even allocate has got to be added on. So they're always chasing, and they are having to allocate far more places than will be built. And where it then goes completely wrong, as the guy explained, was in the plan, if we felt we've actually got to find places for 5,000 houses, we know where we would like the 5,000. But if we've got to come up with sites for 10,000, although we're only going to get 5, we come up with 10 and they build the 5 they want, not the 5 we want. And so planning is actually getting distorted. I mean, if you give the planners the sort of credit for knowing where they ought to have them, it's getting distorted because they're having to provide more sites than will be built. The builders then cherry pick. Everyone knows they cherry pick, but the system is actually giving them the opportunity to cherry pick. An interesting problem. Hard to know what to do with though, because if they don't allocate enough sites, that's the reason they didn't build enough houses. Allocate the sites, they don't get them anyway. It is a bugger.
Bureaucracy.
It is a bugger. Okay, a village hall management committee, George.
Yeah, only update with that is, as I said earlier, we've now got an extra trustee from representative from the film club. We haven't got anybody else still, which would still, or they haven't been in the meetings next week. So at the last meeting we had this gentleman, I can't remember his name now, and we're progressing through that process, and we've now got those people registered with the Charity Commission as trustees, so we've done that.
So that's the ones you already had, plus the one extra.
One extra. So
what is happening to try and get the other people to come on board?
Well, we're still doing the same word of mouth or contacting the various organisations, but the trouble is people aren't really interested, and there's no way we can force them to participate.
Did you see, this doesn't actually necessarily bite the way it's put, but did you see in those template safeguarding policies the suggestion that, of course, you're not actually on parish council property, we hold the title but not the benefit of this. Had you been, then the suggestion was that you actually had to have someone DBS checked for every single group that uses the hall, and this, that and the other, and you can't this and you can't that, and I thought, you gods, this is just a way of being able to do nothing.
I know.
You can't gently write to each of the societies or organisations that uses the hall.
That's what we have done.
And say you can continue to use it, please, but you have to have a representative to be able to do that.
That's what we have done.
And it doesn't
make any difference. If you said you can't use it unless you provide someone, whether that would make any difference, but then we'd lose our income if people stop using the building. So it's catch-22 really, isn't it? So we're still working on persuading people. There has been some progress once that's moved forward a little bit more, then the plan is the AGM in October, I think it is, we're going to propose that we move over to this incorporation model rather than
that makes a lot of sense from
but
what
we've
I
got
can
to that's the first opportunity we'll have to do that. And just on update, you've noticed that we've got a new boiler at the parish council.
I saw a new thermostat, so I figured.
New thermostat, new boiler, you can say it's about a quarter the size of the other one and 10 times as efficient. So
save you a lot of money.
Yeah,
in the long run.
Saving money, and it's on 2 systems, so you can keep this room separately to the other room.
You want oil, I presume.
Yeah,
you've got to pay.
So that was about 5,000, I think. So that was, but money well spent, I think. So we are progressing. But
where is the boiler?
It's in the kitchen.
Oh, okay. And the tank is out the back here somewhere, I suppose.
The oil tank's there. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Come the AGM, then I will aim to come, of course, if I'm here.
Yeah.
And I think it's entirely right that you go for this incorporation because it does take a load off the trustees.
It takes 18 months anyway, probably, to sort it out. So.
Next planning meeting to be advised. Next council.
Can I just say that the planning application that has come hasn't actually reached me, although I've been notified, is to put, we were talking about the mobile, there's application for a mast. Do you remember it came up before and it was on Owley land, the other side of the wood, and it sort of disappeared. nothing really came. Yes, we supported it, but nothing came of it. So we've now got a new one in, and it's for down Acton Lane on the right-hand side, just inside the hedge, nicely in view of everyone.
Okay.
The date is, they want comments by the 5th, I think it is, something like that, but it's before our meeting. However, I have asked for an extension, saying that it could cause, concern, because from what I can see, it's highly visible.
I did have a telephone call at the time from the guy who was responsible for it, when he was trying to get the one near the wood, which we approved. We supported, sorry, we can't approve it, we supported it. He was rather frustrated because he'd put a lot of effort into finding the best place, and the reason it was being opposed by our favourite planner was because it was too near the ancient woodland. And he said, well, it's not actually too near the ancient woodland, you're confusing on the map where the woodland is and where the sort of undergrowth is. But it seems as though they never came to a satisfactory agreement on that, and they still ruled it out.
There was another reason. It could be viewed from the public right-of-way that goes across the middle of the field.
That's right.
So now it's going to be viewed from a road which it's right next to.
Okay. So what's the
That's
space?
logical.
Yeah, it's ludicrous.
So we'll get the application.
Well, I'm hoping it's comes to me tomorrow, but I haven't actually physically got it to send round.
Visit out there, I think, and have a look.
Yes, but you'll see where it makes sense. Anyway,
It is silly.
But I'm hoping that we don't have to have an extra, because it's only a few days, so he should be. But he doesn't normally come back and tell me.
So the dates are there. Items for information. I've drafted this task list. We're not going to need to worry about it very much. It's just really to keep our eye on the things that we knew had to be done, so that the idea of this was not to just let things drift, and we are making progress. So the housing, let's look for small housing sites, which is what happened when Yvonne and I went to see him, and we're waiting for the plan to come out. He told us, if you remember, that he wasn't doing anything until after that. Registering the land holdings will wait until the cemetery is sorted, because then we have the solicitor lined up for that, potentially. Branding the PC assets, I did draft a list and circulated it, which we need to review and then do the rest of it. That also ties in with what you said on your amenities thing. The churchyard wall, the site's been cleared, and we're waiting for a site meeting with Yvonne and the builder and Alf. Surface water drainage project, I was asked by Keith Ashby today, because he's gone to the joint transport board tonight with KCC, and if he gets the chance, he's going to berate them for the fact that they're doing absolutely nothing for Carnarvonton, and he's going to quote us as well, which will make us really popular. He's already put it in writing, I think, and he warned the clerk, so he thinks they won't try and sit on his head. But it's crazy, really. He asked if we'd done anything since, and he said, well, we've really just lost enthusiasm for trying. We're trying to give them an idea on how to do things, and they don't want to join in. SIDS, you've heard about. The information files you've got, it's completed. Voices proposals we've been going through. The standing orders and the financial regs are completed. Painting the village signpost is awaiting Alf's scheduling. International Dark Sky Community, of course, awaits ABC, which will be some time yet. And the contact list is produced, just awaiting the final responses from a couple of the contacts to say that they're happy with it. And the draft FAQs, that awaits you guys, because you didn't like mine.
The International Dark Sky, why are we still awaiting ABC? Why are they so slow?
Well,
they're so slow.
Yes, because they're so slow. They had to make sure that their own lighting system that they were proposing was up to scratch.
Which it isn't, of course.
And they're supposed to be coming back. I was told 6 weeks ago that it was shortly.
That seems to go on forever.
Yes, but we're
astronomical.
To be honest, this is the sort of thing that is a policy thing that they can easily do and then suffer for years. They do need to do it properly. But on the other hand, I mean, it's a bit irritating when everything gets wound up and terribly excited and that, and then nothing goes on.
We were quite keen to move forward with it.
So that's the task list. I think it has proved some value so far. We've done some things. And then the usual thing is the resolution. John,
have you asked if anybody got any information?
Of course, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Other items of information. Clark, have you got any items for information?
I should be away at the end of the month, but I should still be picking up emails like I usually do. But I won't be physically here.
Thank you. Nothing for me, thank you.
She isn't allowed outside the UK though.
No.
Nothing from George.
I did sign the passport.
I don't have a passport.
No,
Anything, Alan? Sue?
No.
No.
Okay, that's good then, thank you. So it's a resolution on the cemetery. Can I have a proposer?
Yeah.
Yep. Seconder? Yeah, fine. Everyone happy? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for coming, Alf, and thank you for staying.
See you later. Around the same time.
Thank you, Miriam.
Good night.
Good night.